Are you all right? It's me, Sir Clunkalot, your personal advisor.
There have been a good number of city building or god simulator type games over the years. In these games, you typically build up your establishments, whether it's a city or a dungeon or whatever it might be, to help meet the needs of its occupants and directly or indirectly provide for them. As a reward for your efforts, you typically see your civilization expand and then grow, and typically with new elements and mechanics thrown in along the way as you master the current ones. My own personal memories of these genres range from the original but surprisingly deep SimCity, the rare console installment in the Super Nintendo action builder hybrid Actrasier, and the tongue-in-cheek fun found in Dungeon Keeper 2. There's some others I've played over the years or that have caught my interest as well, but if I were to throw those three in particular into a blender and hit puree, the resulting smoothie of a game would share some of the qualities with the game we'll be reviewing today, Townsmen VR. Because while I've hovered over many a town or city before in these other types of games, never before, with a true sense of depth, scale, and interaction, have I ever gone from viewing the world like it's a small game board, then zoomed all the way in to ground level to view individual peasants going about their daily work and life in true, full, stereoscopic 3D, and then interact with them in natural ways. Traditionally, these city simulation and god simulator games are fairly complex, with a lot of menus and interfaces to navigate through, and having played a number of these on PC, you have to navigate around a lot to find what you want to actually access. So interface and navigation in particular was one of my main concerns heading into this in VR, and if handled poorly, could go very bad very quickly. Thankfully, the navigation interface is executed wonderfully here. Most direct interaction is done with a single trigger, and the grips allow you to navigate and move the camera. And just like you would with a smartphone, if you pinch or zoom both controllers, it allows you to zoom in and out like you would in a very natural manner. All of their menu-driven interfaces are mapped to one joystick controller, and again, everything is pretty easy to get used to and without hardly a hitch. So in this VR world, what makes it special? As some quick examples. Is this worker needed elsewhere that's mining? Do we need to put him to work the kitchen at the inn or something like that? Alright, that's fine. With a lift of a hand, just go ahead and hit that trigger, pick up the worker, and drop them off another building, and they'll get started on their new assignment. If they're taking too long to grab wood from the lumberyard, or maybe the trek back from the lumberyard is taking them too long, not a problem. Either grab the wood and drop it off in their hands, or pick them up and help them make the return a lot more quickly. This type of natural and direct interaction gives a whole new meaning and feel to the god simulation mechanic and makes for an entirely fresh experience. And while watching a flat render of it in this review might help give you a little bit of an idea of what it's like, to really appreciate the type of freedom this allows you, you really have to experience it for yourself. If I was trying to compare the complexity of the building mechanics between the example games I mentioned earlier to this game, Townsmen VR is closer to games like Dungeon Keeper or Actrasier than I would say SimCity. There's definitely more structures introduced as you go along in this game, and each one typically has at least one or more additional structures or add-ons available, but the goal definitely isn't to pack the entire map with structures. This not only works well for the VR interface, but it also makes sense since the setting is a medieval town and structures, not modern-day New York City. Each campaign level has an introduction with voice acting and characters.
But what if the pirates really come back?
The pirates won't dare attack us anymore.
Which gives some grounding to what you're actually doing on each map. It's not extremely in-depth, but it works perfectly and is all that's really needed. Once you're on to regular gameplay, your objectives can be easily checked on anytime through the thumbstick, as can access the different building menus. Once you reach certain objectives, you might get a little bit more on-screen narrative from characters.
It'd be very dangerous to be here without someone protecting you, especially if there are people around looking for booty.
But for the most part, it is the gameplay that is front and center stage. Exploring each map is part of the fun, and the gradually changing weather and larger maps from mission to mission makes for some nice variety. Some fun little carryovers from games like Dungeon Keeper that I really noted and enjoyed here. If some townsmen are taking you off, yeah, you can give them a little slap, it will make the sound, and they'll see stars above their heads, or if you happen to not politely set them all the way to the ground, if you drop them from higher up, they'll kind of hit the ground and look dizzy as well. Though more often than not, I was accidentally slapping people as I was making my way around the town because my hands were down at my sides. Another really hilarious thing is that sometimes you'll hear townsfolk making bubbling underwater drowning noises, which was likely the result of you knocking them accidentally into the water as you were quickly moving by, fulfilling your godlike duties. If I had to describe the overall pace and feel of this game, I'd describe it as charming and relaxing. Because while you do have goals to work towards, and there are combat units you'll create like spearmen and swordsmen and bowmen, and you do engage in combat, you never feel overly rushed to arrive at those places in time. Taking your time is actually rewarded, and if you search around the city carefully enough, you might even find some extra loot for your townspeople to enjoy. If you haven't already been able to tell, I've really enjoyed my time with this game, and how well especially they've been able to translate the mechanics into the VR realm. The experience of a god simulation game is really greatly enhanced with the benefits VR has to offer, with no drawbacks to speak of. There is the possibility that the complexity might have been toned down a bit versus what they would have presented in a flat screen version, but this doesn't really at all come across as a watered down experience, just a more relaxing type of version they set out to create. Early access Steam reviews for this game were slightly complaining of a lack of content, just not having a lot of missions. But this review is done with the full version 1 release of it, and in that case, this doesn't really seem to be an issue. There's enough missions and enough content and enough time to justify a full retail package. And the game even contains a sandbox mode that allows you to set your own criteria and parameters for custom games, which should give you a lot of replay value. Now, is this a perfect game? No, I wouldn't say so. It feels nicely polished in its initial 1.0 release, and checks all the boxes, but it's definitely not the most narratively enthralling or hugely dynamic in the way that, say, a studio with endless money like Blizzard would be able to develop. But again, that's not what we should be expecting or signed up for. With that said, it fulfilled every hope I had for it going in, and is a thoroughly enjoyable experience. If this installment proves successful for the studio, I'd love to see what their team is capable of in the future, especially with this being such an amazingly solid VR release now under their belt.